Now, a special presentation from KOAT Action 7 News and the Albuquerque Journal, Commitment 2014, the New Mexico gubernatorial debate with Democratic candidate Gary King and Republican Governor Susana Martinez. Here's KOAT Action 7 News anchor and debate moderator Doug Fernandez.
Good evening, New Mexico. Tonight we bring you a live one-hour debate between the two candidates running for governor of New Mexico. Please welcome Republican Governor Susana Martinez and
Mexico and last in economic growth. 4 years ago we were 15th. This year we're 50th. We also are in the bottom or close to the bottom in child welfare. We were 49th, then we were 50th for 2 years, and now we're 49th again. That's unconscionable to me. And third, we think that teachers are leaving in amazing numbers from our education system because the education system is not meeting the needs of our students, it's not meeting the needs of our teachers, it's not meeting the needs of the state. Those are all things that people should consider when they come to this election. We're going to be ready to vote. We're voting now. And so this is one of the most important elections in New Mexico history. And I hope that people, after they hear us tonight, will consider who the best candidate is. I've worked hard as the Attorney General to address some of those needs in New Mexico. We've taken on the largest banks to start the Keep Your Home New Mexico program to help people keep their homes. We've taken on predatory lenders. We've taken on child molesters and in our Internet Crimes Against Children unit. So those are things that we want to talk about tonight, and I hope that we'll have a chance to answer all of these questions to your satisfaction. Thank you.
Mr. King, thank you very much. Governor Martinez, you also have 90 seconds for your opening statement.
Thank you. And good evening. When I took office, New Mexico faced many challenges. I had inherited the greatest deficit in the history of New Mexico. We had lost 50,000 jobs, and pay-to-play was a household term. But I looked you in the eye, and I told you that I would not raise taxes on families or on small businesses, and I kept my promise. And what I did is I worked with the legislature to make sure that we balanced that budget, and in fact, we cut taxes 24 different times during my administration. We all know that New Mexico is the #1 state that is most reliant on federal spending. And that's why New Mexico families are hurt so badly when there's so much dysfunction in Washington. But what we did is we passed a historic jobs package for there to be creation of jobs, private sector jobs. And as a result, 32,000 private sector jobs have been created in New Mexico. And I'm going to continue to fight for reform in education. That is my passion. We have invested more money in education than ever before. And that, with those reforms, what has come, New Mexico is actually the #1 state in the country with the greatest graduation growth. And come along our Hispanic and our poverty children as the #1 and 2 in our state, leading in advanced placement testing. Oh, I'm so sorry.
It's okay. I should explain to the viewers at home, when you do see the yellow light means they have about 15 seconds, and red light means to wrap it up. So I'll go ahead and remind the candidates at this time. Okay, right now we begin tonight's questioning from our panel with a specific question for each candidate. Action 7 News anchor Shelley Rabanda will ask both of those questions. Shelley.
We'll begin tonight with you, Mr. King. Good evening and welcome. You've said in the past that you think that some of the governor's education policies have worked, yet you've said you would get rid of all federal testing requirements if you're elected as governor, which could mean New Mexico could lose hundreds of $millions in federal funding for our state and our kids' education. So what is your plan?
Mr. King, you have a minute 15, and again, because of this type of question, there will be no rebuttal here. Mr. King, go ahead.
Yes, and what I've said is that I'm certainly willing to look at doing away with most of the federal testing that's required. And as a matter of fact, we in New Mexico have been willing to go our own way sometimes and not take federal money. We have about $3 billion a year that we appropriate in state funds to the schools. And so, indeed, there are some millions of dollars that might come from the federal government, but if we think that that money is doing something that's bad for our children, if we think that it's not good for our school system, then I think that we should go our own way. So I'm willing to do that. I don't think that I've said that I necessarily would do it. What I will do is end high-stakes testing, because we have so much testing in our schools now. I do believe it's bad for our children. There's a lot of discussion in federal circles now about whether it was a big mistake to do No Child Left Behind, whether it's a big mistake to proceed with Common Core in the way that we are with regard to the amount of testing that we're doing for our students. We do about 45 days a semester in testing or preparing for testing for our students, and that's time that's not good time for them to actually be learning and to be good students. And so the first thing that I will do is give a very close look to the amount of testing that we're doing, the standardized testing we're doing, and put education back in the hands of educators, because they're the ones that know how to test our students.
Mr. King, you're up for time. Thank you very much. Shelley Urbando also has the next question, specific one directed at Governor Martinez. Shelley.
Good evening, Governor. Teacher performance is partly based now on the standardized testing from students, which we know has been very controversial. Many argue that the teachers now are only teaching for these standardized tests. So if you're reelected governor in your next term, would you stay the course with your policies, or would you look to make any changes?
You know, every profession gets evaluated. Every professional actually receives an evaluation, and teachers are no different. And what we are evaluating is, are our children learning? And that's why I want to talk to the parents. Are our children learning? And the way we do that is we measure, we assess our children throughout the year so that we know that they're learning to read, to do math, to do the various subjects that they're supposed to know during that class. And so when they're assessed on the material that they've been taught. Not anything different from that. And that's why learning is so important, and it's part of the assessment of our teachers. We want to reward our best teachers. We want to make sure that they get the praise that they deserve. And those that need a little bit of help, that they get the professional assistance that they deserve. It's a 3-year average to make sure that the teachers are getting better and doing better, but I do not see anything that is contrary, especially for our parents, to have that knowledge and to know that your child is lagging behind in math but doing really well in reading. That's information every single parent deserves. Now, I believe every child can learn.
Thank you. Our next question from our panel comes from Albuquerque Journal reporter James Monteleone. James.
Thanks, Doug. New Mexico's job growth has trailed our neighboring states over the past 4 years. What do you think New Mexico needs to do differently in order to improve the state economy and add substantial numbers of new jobs to our workforce?
Governor, you go first. You have a minute 15.
Well, New Mexico is very unique because New Mexico is the #1 state that is reliant on the federal dollar for our national labs and our military bases. And because of that, we have to diversify our economy. We have to be able to diversify our economy and build a structure where we are welcoming other businesses to come to New Mexico and helping the small businesses within New Mexico expand if that's what they wish. That's why we passed the historic jobs package just last year. And it was praised by Democrats and Republicans, and we did it in a bipartisan way. This allowed for jobs to be created in New Mexico, a total of 32,000 jobs created here in the state of New Mexico. I think we have to diversify our jobs because to rely on Washington is to rely on failure. My opponent, he wants to rely on Washington and the Washington dollars, and he wants to raise your taxes. He did it before. He says he doesn't regret it, which means he'll do it again.
Mr. King, you also have a minute 15 to respond.
Well, first off, my my package for helping New Mexico's economy would focus our attention on small business in New Mexico. We have a great group of small businesses in New Mexico. We have agriculture in New Mexico, and right now we all know that the governor's package is failing because every year, every quarter for the last 4 years we have lost jobs. And so the 30,000 jobs they've created are at the same time that we've lost more than 40,000 jobs in other sectors. And so giving big tax breaks, giving big tax breaks to big corporations is not working. We have to focus our largesse on our own New Mexico businesses. We have to stop outsourcing to businesses from out of state. We should be focusing on helping our film industry. We should be focusing on helping our construction industry. One of the worst sectors in New Mexico right now is construction because we're not getting our capital outlay dollars out to the communities. And so there are ways for us to help the economy, but what we're doing right now is failing, and we know it's failing, and every other state around us that has federal jobs too. Nevada. I'm sorry, I saw the light flash a little bit, so I wasn't
15
sure about
seconds.
that.
Your red's
Okay.
about to go on.
Every other state around us, Nevada, Colorado, Arizona, they have federal jobs, but we're doing much worse than they are.
All right, Governor Martinez, you have 30 seconds for rebuttal.
I think what my opponent doesn't understand is we're the #1 state that relies on federal funding. And because of that, we are hit the hardest. And that's why we have to diversify our economy and make sure that there are jobs of all kinds. We have to make sure that we welcome businesses from all over the country, all over the world, and also help our local businesses grow and expand.
Mr. King, you also have a half-minute rebuttal.
Well, one of the problems that we have is that the governor's tax package really just shifted the tax burden to local governments. So because of the tax breaks that they gave to large corporations, we took away what's called the hold harmless for local government, and they had to increase their gross receipts tax, both counties and cities. That impacts small New Mexico business more than any other kind of business. And so this whole issue of taxes, we need to look at our taxes. We need to have tax fairness. But if we don't have a reasonable tax structure, we're not going to have a good economy. And that's a position that we're in right now.
All right, Mr. King, thank you. Our next question comes from panelist Action 7 News anchor Todd Kurtz. Todd.
Albuquerque and Santa Fe both have higher minimum wages than the rest of the state. Are you in favor of increasing the minimum wage? If so, to what amount? For reference to viewers at home, Albuquerque right now is at $8.60 an hour. Santa Fe is at $10.66 an hour. The state, $7.50.
Mr. King, you go first, a minute 15.
Well, I definitely favor increasing the minimum wage. I think that one of the things that will help our economy the quickest is that people that are making a minimum wage of $7.50, not even enough to take care of your family. Those people, if they make another $1 an hour, will certainly go and spend that in a community. So it will impact and it will make our economy more robust because it has that rollover effect. I would certainly be for increasing the minimum wage at least to the Albuquerque level. I have said that I favor increasing the minimum wage at least to $10.10 an hour, and I think that that would be a wage that would allow our families, if they're working, to make enough that they can support their families.
Governor Martinez, you also have a minute 15 for your answer.
You know, as governor, it's my responsibility to make sure that we can provide a robust economy, but we have to remain competitive. During the legislative session, I was willing to compromise with an $8 minimum wage. That would make us competitive with Arizona, Colorado, and Texas. But if we do not remain competitive, then our small businesses are going to leave New Mexico, and we will be overlooked by other companies and businesses and will never be viewed as somewhere that they want to relocate to. You know, it's interesting that my opponent, while he was a state representative, actually voted against raising the minimum wage, voted against it a couple of times. And not until he starts to run for governor does he then begin to actually say that that's what he wants to do, is raise it to a level where actually we're not competitive with our surrounding states, and all we're going to do is reduce the economy in New Mexico, and our families are going to hurt, or we're going to have jobs that are lost because they're going to go someplace else.
Mr. King, 30-second rebuttal.
Well, you know, the facts don't really support the governor's position. Other states that have raised their minimum wage on a statewide level are doing much better economically than we are. There was a study that showed the 13 states that raised their minimum wage are doing better economically generally than the other states who did not. So this idea that somehow or another this will make us not competitive is not a realistic one. What we need to do is stimulate our economy by getting money moving in our economy. And so the governor vetoed the minimum wage last year, 2 years ago now. She likes to talk about votes that I took 10 or 15 years ago, but we're talking about what's happening right now.
Thank you, Mr. King. Governor, you also have a half minute for rebuttal?
Absolutely. Our minimum wage has to be competitive. And the one thing that my opponent just can't seem to grasp is that we are the most reliant on the federal dollar. So those other states in that study did not include any one state that was most reliant on the federal dollar. And therefore, raising the minimum wage at the same time as being so reliant on the federal government, my opponent would rather have that federal dollar rely on that minimum wage to be high and not be competitive. And that is not where we want to go. We do not want to go back to the Richardson days.